Hello, this is Reggie York. I'm doing a presentation on some basic lessons of science that accompanies a book I have written about becoming a social science researcher. This presentation helps you to test your very basic understanding of science. It's not designed to be comprehensive, so this should not be some kind of score you compute for the sake of showing how much you know about science. It's just a sample of a few things that illustrate some of the basic concepts that are designed to help you understand something about the nature of science as a way of knowing. You're given 7 situations and asked if there is a major problem with the situation. We will discuss each one. These situations have been taken by a book by myself, Becoming a Social Researcher. These examples, as I've said, are not comprehensive. For each situation, you'll be asked to pause this presentation and read the situation and be prepared to answer the question, is there a significant problem illustrated by this situation? If you have the book, you could have read these beforehand and marked whether there is a problem or not. This does not ask if you can find a way to improve the situation, but only if you find a significant problem illustrated. Some of them have a problem that have been put in there to intentionally illustrate a problem. Some have not. Here is the first situation. If you will pause and read this, if you've not read it beforehand, and then decide, is there a problem with the situation? Again, not can you improve it, but is there a problem with it? When you finish, then click back, and we'll go to the next slide, and I'll talk a little bit about it. Okay, I guess you have come back now to consider the situation. Did you find a major problem? Did the presentation illustrate an appreciation of science as a way of knowing? If you did, then of course you did not have a problem. Did it show a systematic way of collecting and analyzing data? I might say also an unbiased way, something that does not demonstrate cherry-picking of facts to prove a point. Also, conclusions that are reasonably connected with the data results. These are the 3 major kinds of questions we're going to talk about in this very elementary lesson about the nature of science. So let's look at it from the standpoint of the first situation. So look at the first one, an appreciation of science as a way of knowing. This situation did not seem to suggest that there was like cherry picking of data. There was not a bias in it that I could see. So I say it's okay there. How about systematic way of collecting and analyzing data? Data were collected before and after and again was computed. This seemed like a systematic way of engaging in science. Conclusions, the service was effective and the decision was made to generalize to a similar group of people. When we do research, we want to do it for the sake of generalizing from one situation to another. So it's depending on how much we can generalize depends on how similar our data group was to some larger group. So I say this one was basically okay. So if you said okay, give yourself a point. Here is a second situation. Again, if you will pause and read that and decide whether or not there is a major problem with this situation. I assume you have done your duty and you have made a decision. So the question, did you find a major problem, yes or no? First of all, let's look at those questions again. Did it illustrate an appreciation of science as a way of knowing? I would say no, because it avoided data on many in behalf of one's personal experience. That is not scientific. if you have many studies showing that things are different from your personal experience, if you appreciate science, you will defer to that data rather than to your individual experience, or the experience of only one person otherwise. A systematic way of collecting and analyzing data. Well, this particular approach avoided appreciating the data. Therefore, the conclusions were not reasonably connected to the data. It was just, this has been my experience, so this is what I believe. That is not using science as a way of knowing. Here is the third situation, so if you will pause and read that and then come back. Did you find a major problem? Let's look at those three items again. First of all, an appreciation of science as a way of knowing. Basically, when we look at this situation where you're talking about I'm going to put them back up again. The major thing here was a failure to recognize chance as one of the reasons, one of the explanations of our data. In the situation that was described, statistical significance was not achieved. Therefore, in regard to appreciation of science, chance is a major issue in science. If you ignore that, you have failed to appreciate science. A systematic way of collecting and analyzing data. Statistical significance is an issue that you will encounter and discuss. Statistical significance was not achieved here. Therefore, the conclusions should have been that you did not find statistical significance, therefore you did not find evidence of the improvement of grades. So this is not a situation that, it is a situation that had a problem. Okay, if you said it did have a problem, then you give yourself a point. Look at this one. Did you find the major problem? Let's look at these three things again. What you have done here is you've looked at data for your neighborhood and then decided that it's the same data that you have can be generalized, meaning it's the same thing you'd find if you conducted data on the entire United States of America. Well, generalization is the key issue here. If you collect data from your neighborhood, that's a relatively small, very small segment of the population of the United States. For you to say that the data you collected from your neighborhood, it gives you reason to draw conclusions about the entire nation. That's just going far, far too much down the road of generalization for your conclusions to be reasonable. So that is one where there was a problem. If you recognize that it was a problem, give yourself a point. Here is the fifth situation. So if you will pause and come back, we'll talk about this one as well. Did you find a major problem? Let's look at all three of these things again. Excuse me, I have to go back and quickly review it to see which one of these was okay. Okay. You found statistical significance in the examination of stress and excuse me, stress and health problems, you found statistical significance. So this is a situation where you appreciated science, you had a systematic way of collecting that data, and you drew appropriate conclusions. So I would say that situation is one that is okay. So if you said the situation is okay, then you should give yourself a point. Here is situation number 6. So James has decided he wants to conduct a study using phone interviews. He asks friends for ideas. They suggest examining whether victims of rape have less anxiety after receiving a support group service than they did before the service. So James decided this is the research question he will pursue. But he starts his process deciding he wants to conduct interviews. Did you find a major problem? Did it illustrate appreciation of science as a way of knowing? The bigger problem for me was the systematic way of collecting and analyzing data. This researcher, I would say, put the cart before the horse. You don't start a research process deciding what your methods are. You just start it deciding what your research question is. That should come before you decide that you want to do phone interviews rather than a mailed survey or some kind of other method of examining your data. Here is a 7th situation. Pause, look at that situation, and then we'll come back and talk about it. Did you find a major problem here? I would say that there is no major problem. This showed an appreciation of science as a way of knowing. Conclusions that are appropriate. This person basically said that I will use data from dozens of studies which had consistent results as more important than my own limited experience with a particular methodology. So if you said this situation did show a problem, then give yourself another point for that. So what have we discovered? Do you appreciate science as a way of knowing? That is, systematic collected data in an unbiased way is better than your own personal experience. Do you appreciate how a systematic method of an inquiry will give you the best opportunity to know, such as, for example, avoiding doing cherry picking of data or organizing data in some kind of biased way? How about scientific evidence? Do you appreciate scientific evidence as the best means for drawing conclusions? This is the end of the presentation. I hope this was helpful to you.